Your phone buzzes. You look down. It's an invitation. A party tonight at someone's place across town. Good people, people you actually like, and for a moment you consider it. Then something shifts. A quiet tightness in your chest. A subtle but unmistakable voice somewhere underneath all the polite reasoning. Please, not tonight. So you type back something believable. Tired, early morning, maybe next time. And the second you hit send, you feel it. Not guilt, not loneliness, relief. Clean, immediate, almost embarrassing relief. You put the phone down, you look at your couch, your lamp, the book on the table, and everything just settles. But then the second thought comes, the one that always follows. What's wrong with me? Here's the thing. Maybe that's the wrong question entirely. Maybe the more honest question isn't why do you avoid people? It's why does everyone assume you should want to go in the first place? And here's the first thing that needs to be said clearly. You are not antisocial. That word gets thrown around so casually at the quiet kid in school, at the colleague who skips the after-work drinks, at anyone who simply doesn't perform enthusiasm on demand. And after hearing it enough times, something strange happens. You start to believe it. You start to carry it like a diagnosis. But antisocial, the psychological definition, means something entirely different. It means hostility, indifference to other people's well-being, and absence of empathy. That's not you. What you have is something quieter and something far more deliberate. Psychologists call it an asocial preference, a genuine, neutral inclination towards solitude. Not because people exhaust you emotionally, but because something in your wiring finds stillness more nourishing than noise. There's a whole psychology behind this, a science. Researchers have been studying it for decades, and what they found changes everything about how you see yourself. Because it turns out, this isn't a personality flaw. It's a neurological difference, and it starts inside the brain itself. In the 1960s, a British psychologist named Hans Eysenck proposed something that most people still don't know about. He suggested that introverts and extroverts don't just behave differently, their brains are running at different baseline levels of arousal. Introverts, he found, already have a higher level of internal stimulation happening naturally, which means when the outside world adds noise, conversation, crowds, and social demands on top of that, the brain hits its limit faster. It's not sensitivity in the fragile sense. It's calibration, a thermostat set at a different temperature. And when the environment becomes too loud, too demanding, too much, the brain doesn't ask politely to leave. It pulls you inward, toward quiet, toward home. Psychologists have a term for the spaces people seek when they need to regulate their mental energy. They call them restorative niches, environments that bring the nervous system back into balance. For you, home isn't an escape from life. It's where you process it. That couch, that lamp, that particular silence, it's not avoidance. It's your brain doing exactly what it was built to do. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because this goes deeper than introversion, much deeper. And your body has been trying to tell you that for years. Think about the last time you walked into a crowded room. Before you had a single conversation, before anyone said your name, something in you already knew. A low hum of tension, a subtle shift in your breathing. Maybe your eyes moved a little faster, scanning without meaning to. Your conscious mind hadn't caught up yet, but your body already had. This is what researchers call interoceptive awareness, the ability to feel your internal state before you can name it. And studies show that people with high sensory processing sensitivity experience this more acutely than others. The noise isn't just loud, it's physical. A conversation at a party isn't just tiring. It can feel like mental arithmetic happening in real time, tracking tone, subtext, expression, expectation, all at once. Psychologist Elaine Aron spent years researching this. She found that around 15 to 20% of people have a nervous system that processes sensory and emotional information more deeply than average. These aren't anxious people necessarily. They're deeply wired people, tuned to higher frequencies. Their amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, responds more readily, more urgently, not to danger exactly, but to overwhelm. And here's what that means for you. The exhaustion you feel after a social event isn't weakness. It's the cost of running a more complex internal process all night. You weren't drained by people. You were drained by the volume of everything. And that raises a question that no one really talks about. Did the world around you make this harder than it needed to be? The world didn't always work this way. Author Susan Cain traced it back to a quiet but significant cultural shift in early 20th century America. Before that, society valued what she called a culture of character, depth, integrity, inner life, what you were when no one was watching. Then something changed. Cities grew, commerce expanded. Suddenly you had to sell yourself to strangers in rooms full of noise, and a new ideal emerged. The culture of personality, loud, bold, visible, likable on first impression. That shift never reversed. It just got louder. Open-plan offices designed for constant interaction, social media rewarding performance over reflection, networking events built on the assumption that the most valuable person in the room is the one working it. Nobody designed this world to harm quiet people, but it does. And when you spend years in an environment that wasn't built for your wiring, you don't just feel tired. You start to wonder if you're the problem. You're not. You were just handed the wrong environment. But what does living inside that mismatch actually look like, day after day, in the small, specific patterns of a real life? You know the feeling of a plan getting canceled, not disappointment, that other thing, the quiet exhale. The almost guilty wave of thank goodness. You put your phone down and the evening opens up like a gift you didn't ask for but somehow needed. You know the preparation that goes into a social event, not just getting dressed, the mental rehearsal, running through who might be there, what you might talk about, how long you'll need to stay before leaving feels acceptable. You know the specific tiredness afterward, even when it was fine, even when you laughed and meant it. There's still a cost, a kind of cognitive debt that only sleep and silence can repay. And you know the deep, uncomplicated satisfaction of a solitary routine, the same cup of tea, the same chair, the same hour that belongs entirely to you. These aren't quirks, they're not dysfunction. They are the behavioral signatures of a mind that processes the world more intensely and manages its energy accordingly. Every single one of those patterns makes sense now. Though here's the question worth sitting with. Does it always stay healthy, or is there a line, somewhere, between chosen solitude and something else entirely? So science validates the quiet life, but here's where honest research asks you to pause. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi spent decades studying peak human performance. What he found was striking. The deepest states of focus, creativity, and meaning almost always happened alone. He called it flow, and solitude, it turns out, is one of its most reliable doorways. Other studies show that chosen alone time lowers cortisol, improves emotional regulation, and gives the mind space to integrate experience rather than just accumulate it. But the research carries a caveat, an important one. There's a difference between solitude that restores and withdrawal that protects. When staying home becomes a strategy for avoiding fear, shame, or the discomfort of being seen, the outcomes shift. Chronic avoidant isolation is linked to increased anxiety, weakened sense of self, and over time, a quiet erosion of confidence. The question isn't how much time you spend alone, it's why. Chosen solitude builds you. Fearful isolation slowly hollows you out. And interestingly, people who fall into that first category, the ones who choose solitude freely, tend to have something surprising about their relationships, something most people wouldn't expect. Here's what people get wrong about those who prefer staying home. They assume the solitude means loneliness, that preferring quiet must come with an empty contact list and shallow bonds. But research tells a completely different story. Studies on introvert friendship patterns consistently show that home preferring people don't have fewer meaningful relationships, they have fewer but deeper ones. One-on-one conversations over group gatherings, presence over performance, honesty over small talk. In fact, research suggests they often score higher on empathy in intimate settings, precisely because they're not managing a crowd. They're fully there, with you, listening in a way that most people rarely experience. It was never that they didn't need people, it's that they need people differently. Not breadth, depth, not the party, the long conversation after everyone else goes home. That's not a limitation, that's a relational philosophy. And it points towards something even more significant. Something that happens quietly over years, inside the mind of someone who has chosen to spend real time with themselves. Because what solitude does to a person, given enough time, is remarkable. Here's what people get wrong about those who prefer staying home. They assume the solitude means loneliness, that preferring quiet must come with an empty contact list and shallow bonds. But research tells a completely different story. Studies on introvert friendship patterns consistently show that home-preferring people don't have fewer meaningful relationships. They have fewer but deeper ones. One-on-one conversations over group gatherings, presence over performance, honesty over small talk. In fact, research suggests they often score higher on empathy in intimate settings, precisely because they're not managing a crowd. They're fully there, with you, listening in a way that most people rarely experience. It was never that they didn't need people, it's that they need people differently. Not breadth, depth. Not the party, the long conversation after everyone else goes home. That's not a limitation, that's a relational philosophy. And it points towards something even more significant, something that happens quietly, over years, inside the mind of someone who has chosen to spend real time with themselves. Because what solitude does to a person, given enough time, is remarkable. There's a network in your brain that activates when nothing is happening. No task, no screen, no conversation, just quiet. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network, and for a long time, researchers dismissed it, assuming an idle brain was simply wasting energy. But then they looked closer. The default mode network is where you process your own memories, where you work through complex emotions, where you ask yourself what you actually believe, separate from what everyone around you believes. It's the biological seat of self-reflection, and it only fully activates in stillness. Research on self-concept clarity, how well a person knows and understands themselves, consistently shows that people who spend intentional time alone develop stronger, more stable identities. They're less susceptible to social pressure, less likely to adopt opinions simply because the room seems to hold them, more capable of sitting with uncertainty without needing someone else to resolve it. Home, for these people, isn't where life is avoided, it's where life is understood. Every quiet evening, every canceled plan that turned into an hour of reading or thinking or simply existing without performance, that was your mind doing something extraordinary, integrating, building, becoming. Solitude isn't subtraction from a full life, it's a different kind of fullness entirely. Though that raises one final question, one that goes beyond neuroscience and psychology, one that's older than both. Centuries before neuroscience had language for any of this, a French philosopher named Blaise Pascal wrote something quietly devastating. He said that all of humanity's problems stem from the inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Read that again. Not from war, not from greed, from the inability to simply be still. And yet, the people who have always found stillness natural, even necessary, have spent their entire lives being told something is wrong with them. Think about what that means. In a world that measures worth by visibility, by how many rooms you fill, how many people know your name,
how loudly you announce your presence, the inward life gets treated as a deficit, a consolation prize for people who couldn't manage the alternative. But what if it isn't? What if the capacity to sit with yourself, to find the outside world genuinely optional, to need silence the way others need company? What if that was never a flaw at all? You were never failing at being an extrovert. You were succeeding at being yourself, in a world that forgot to make room for that. And that changes how you read everything, including that night on the couch. Remember that notification, the invitation, the address, the quiet tightness in your chest, and the relief, that clean, immediate relief when you finally said no. You spent years reading that moment as evidence of something broken in you, a social failure, a personality flaw dressed up in comfortable excuses. But now you know what it actually was. It was your nervous system protecting its energy, your brain choosing restoration over performance, your identity quietly and consistently telling you the truth about what you need. Understanding why you are the way you are doesn't change you. It frees you from spending the rest of your life trying to be someone else. You were never the problem. You were just someone who needed a different kind of space to be fully human. And that's not a small thing. That's everything.